She was sleeping in her own bedroom. Safe. 14 years old. Her little sister asleep in the bed next to her. Then, at 1 a.m. on June 5, 2002, she felt cold steel pressed against her throat. A voice whispered in the darkness, "I have a knife at your neck. Don't make a sound. Get up and come with me." Elizabeth Smart's 9-month nightmare had just begun, and the man who took her? Her family had let him into their home. Salt Lake City, Utah. The Smart family lived in Federal Heights, an upscale neighborhood where children rode their bikes and families felt safe. Ed and Lois Smart had 6 children. Elizabeth was their second oldest, a bright 14-year-old who played the harp and loved to read. The fall before Elizabeth's kidnapping, the family encountered a homeless man panhandling in downtown Salt Lake City. He called himself Emmanuel, or sometimes Emmanuel. He seemed harmless enough, just down on his luck. So Lois Smart offered him $5 and a job. He could work on their roof, earn some money. He spent a few hours at their home that November day in 2001. Then he disappeared. They never saw him again. What the Smarts didn't know was that Emmanuel had been watching, studying, waiting. 7 months later, in the early morning hours of June 5, 2002, Emmanuel returned. His real name was Brian David Mitchell, 49 years old, a self-proclaimed street preacher with delusions of divine purpose. He cut through the kitchen window screen. He crept through the house. He found the bedroom where Elizabeth and her 9-year-old sister, Mary Catherine, slept. Mary Catherine woke to the sound of a man's voice threatening her sister. Terrified, she pretended to be asleep. She watched through barely open eyes as the stranger forced Elizabeth out of bed at knife point. She heard him warn Elizabeth, "If you scream, if you try anything, I will kill you and your family." Then they were gone. Mary Catherine was paralyzed with fear. For 2 hours, she lay there, convinced the man would return for her if she made a sound. Finally, she ran to her parents' room. Elizabeth is gone. A man took her. Within an hour, police swarmed the Smart home. Search dogs tracked Elizabeth's scent from the house, up the street, and then it vanished. She had disappeared into the night. The Smart family did everything they could. They created a website. They provided home videos to the media. They offered a reward of $250,000. John Walsh featured Elizabeth on America's Most Wanted. Her face was everywhere. Billboards, news broadcasts, milk cartons. 16,000 tips poured in. Volunteers on foot and horseback combed the mountains and valleys around Salt Lake City. The nation was captivated. Where was Elizabeth Smart? But investigators were looking in the wrong direction. They focused on Richard Ricci, a handyman who had worked at the Smart home and had a criminal history. Ricci denied any involvement. In August 2002, while still in prison on a parole violation, he suffered a brain hemorrhage and died. The case went cold, but Elizabeth was alive. Barely. The night of her abduction, Mitchell forced her to walk 4 miles through the woods in her red pajamas. He brought her to a campsite in the foothills above Salt Lake City. Waiting there was his wife, Wanda Barzee. They performed what Mitchell called a marriage ceremony. Elizabeth was now his wife, he told her. His second wife. God had commanded it. Then Mitchell raped her. He would rape her daily for the next 9 months. Elizabeth was chained to a tree. Sometimes she was hidden in a hole in the ground. She was given new clothes, a gray bud robe and veil that covered her face and body completely. Mitchell called her Augustine. Her old life was over, he told her. She belonged to him now. He starved her. He forced her to drink alcohol. He made her watch pornography. And he threatened constantly. "If you try to escape, I will kill you. If you tell anyone, I will kill your family." Elizabeth once heard her uncle calling for her during a search. She was so close, but she couldn't answer. Mitchell had a knife to her side. In August 2002, there was another chance. A Salt Lake City detective approached Elizabeth, Mitchell, and Barzee at the public library. The trio looked suspicious. Why was this young girl wearing a veil? Why wouldn't she speak? Mitchell explained they were ministers protecting their daughter. The detective believed him and walked away. Elizabeth later testified, "I felt like hope was walking out the door." September 2002. Mitchell decided it was time to leave Utah. He took Elizabeth and Barzee to San Diego, California. They camped on the streets. They panhandled. Elizabeth was always veiled, always silent, always watched. Back in Salt Lake City, 9-year-old Mary Catherine was trying to remember. The voice. That voice in the darkness the night her sister was taken. She knew that voice. In October 2002, while flipping through a Guinness Book of World Records, Mary Catherine saw a picture of a muscular woman. Something clicked. The homeless man, the one who worked on their roof. Emmanuel. She ran to her parents. "I think I know who took Elizabeth." The Smart family begged police to release a sketch of Emmanuel. The police resisted. They didn't think it was credible. Finally, on February 3, 2003, the family held their own press conference and released the sketch themselves. Within days, calls came in. Mitchell's stepson recognized him. His ex-wife recognized him. The walls were closing in. March 12, 2003. Sandy, Utah. Just 18 miles from the Smart home. Two witnesses spotted three people walking down the street. Two adults and a young girl in a gray veil. They recognized the adults from the America's Most Wanted broadcast. They called 911. Police responded within minutes. They approached the trio carefully. "Are you Elizabeth Smart?" they asked the veiled girl. She denied it at first. She called herself Augustine. Mitchell had trained her well. But the officers persisted. They separated the three and took them to the police station. When they removed her veil, there was no doubt. It was Elizabeth. After 246 days in captivity, Elizabeth Smart was going home. The reunion was emotional. Ed Smart later told reporters he was stunned. He couldn't believe she was alive. The nation celebrated. Elizabeth Smart, the girl everyone had been searching for, was finally safe. But the legal battle was just beginning. Mitchell and Barzee were charged with kidnapping, sexual assault, and burglary. Mitchell was deemed incompetent to stand trial. Again and again. For years, he disrupted court hearings by singing hymns and delivering religious rants. In November 2009, Wanda Barzee finally pleaded guilty. She apologized to Elizabeth in court. "I'm so sorry, Elizabeth, for all the pain and suffering I caused you and your family." She was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. In March 2010, Mitchell was finally ruled competent. His trial began in November 2010. Elizabeth, now 23 years old, took the stand. For 3 days, she testified. She described the sexual abuse, the starvation, the threats, the complete and utter control Mitchell had over her life. On December 10, 2010, a jury found Brian David Mitchell guilty of kidnapping and unlawful transportation of a minor with intent to engage in sexual activity. In May 2011, he was sentenced to life in federal prison. Elizabeth Smart could have retreated from public life after her rescue. She could have tried to forget, but she chose differently. In 2011, she founded the Elizabeth Smart Foundation to help survivors of sexual assault and to promote awareness about child abductions. She became a correspondent for Crime Watch Daily. She testified before Congress multiple times to support child protection legislation and the Amber Alert system. She wrote a memoir, My Story, published in 2013. In it, she details her kidnapping, her captivity, and her recovery. She speaks openly about the shame she felt, the belief that she had been ruined. She speaks about how her family's love helped her heal. In 2017, she produced a Lifetime movie about her experience, I Am Elizabeth Smart, telling her story from her own perspective. Elizabeth married Matthew Gilmore in 2012. They have 3 children. She continues to advocate for survivors and speaks publicly about hope, healing, and resilience. On January 21, 2026, Netflix released Kidnapped, Elizabeth Smart, a 91-minute documentary told entirely in Elizabeth's own words. Now 38 years old, she reflects on her abduction, the 9 months of horror, and the power of hope that sustained her. In interviews promoting the documentary, Elizabeth has been candid about the lasting impact of her trauma. She felt embarrassed after her rescue. She felt shame, even though she knew intellectually that none of it was her fault. But she also speaks about what saved her. Hope, the belief that her family still loved her, that they still wanted her, that there was a future beyond the nightmare. It's that belief in a better future, a belief in the positive in life and the good that will come, she told the Deseret News. That's what I held on to, and that's how I survived my kidnapping. The Elizabeth Smart case became the most followed child abduction case in United States history. It was a media sensation. It was a miracle. But most of all, it was a story of survival. A 14-year-old girl endured the unimaginable. She was taken from her bed, held captive, raped daily, starved, and threatened. She was so close to rescue, so many times, and yet so far. But she survived. And more than that, she transformed her pain into purpose. She became a voice for the voiceless, an advocate for survivors, a beacon of hope for families in crisis. 24 years after her rescue, Elizabeth Smart is still fighting. For victims, for survivors, for children, and for a world where no one has to endure what she endured. Her story is a reminder. Even in the darkest moments, hope can survive. Even after unimaginable trauma, healing is possible. And even when the world seems cruel and unjust, there are people who will never stop searching, never stop hoping, never stop fighting. This was the story of Elizabeth Smart, a survivor, an advocate, a voice that refused to be silenced. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe.